Hey guys, welcome back to the Goodfellow Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Barone. If you like us, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Don't forget to look at our Patreon channel and check out our shop with all the Goodfellow memorabilia, the hats and the shirts and all that kind of good stuff. You might like some of the things we got going on there. But without further ado, I have a really special guest today. Somebody from my legal team, and they actually know uh, the real ins and outs of the legal system, what the FBI did to me. Of course, if you're a lawyer, uh, they are anonymous because of the fact that they are still practicing law, and they also don't want any repercussions from the government. Without further ado, I'd like to uh, say thanks for coming on. Obviously, it's been a long time since I seen you, but I appreciate you coming on. And this is, I know you guys, did a lot for me, and I can't thank you enough. I guess we can kind of start, if you want, about what happened to me. My arrest, my second pinch in 2009 of January. If you can elaborate what they did on the illegal search and seizure, how they messed all of that up, and then we can go from there.
Well, first, let me just say thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate that. And I'm glad to see you out still and free. It was a
Thanks,
lot of
me
work
too.
getting you there.
It was, and I really appreciate it. Thanks so much. We're going to show a picture of later on of my of me being my when I first got released. I just came across some pictures and I found them, and so somebody from there sent them to me, and so I'm going to show that how we celebrated. Uh, it was really good.
Oh yeah, the party at the bar.
Yep. That's it. Yeah, that's right. We even had Ed McDonald there. If anybody doesn't remember Ed McDonald, he was in the good movie, The Goodfellows. He's very famous. He also represented Joe Massino.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's
Joe,
he's done a lot of mob movies.
that's right.
He's,
That's right.
yeah, he's been in a
He
lot of them. He likes
yes,
to
he
he
has.
likes to walk the line. He's a real special guy.
Yeah, if you want to be nice, yes, exactly.
Yes.
But my it was a definitely a liberation day. That's what I was looking for the word that my friend texted me.
Yeah,
Okay.
for
Yeah.
sure.
So let them know a little bit how the arrest took place and a little bit of what you had to go through to get the illegal search and seizure. As a matter of fact, I'm in the law books with the attorney on the case.
Yes. Yeah, your suppression hearing for the illegal search and seizure was made case law as a result of the judge's decision, our 40 some odd page decision that she wrote, where she pointed out how the NYPD officers who testified as witnesses for the government lied on the stand. She was, she parsed her words. She didn't actually say they lied, but she said they lied. Um, yeah, that whole thing was a complete debacle. And let's start with first. They didn't have a warrant to arrest you. They didn't have a warrant to search your home. They moved within, I think it was 72 hours to secure the arrest. They had you under surveillance up till the point where you pulled into your driveway, and I believe you were with your ex-girlfriend with whom you owned the house at that time.
That's right.
And I believe that did they draw weapons on you to get you out of the car?
Yeah, the hell the head guy. One of them had the gun right to my head, and
Yeah.
I hit his gun like this. I said, "Get that off of me."
Meanwhile, as I recall, at trial, they discussed the activities of that day, and you were at the dry cleaners, the grocery store. You were doing all kinds of nefarious things, apparently.
My usual.
But yeah, but your usual nefarious stuff, picking up your dry cleaning. So,
Yeah.
as I recall, they pulled you out of the car in the driveway and held you out there for quite some time before they lead you open, or was the garage open? I can't recall if the garage was open.
Uh, no, I don't think the garage. I don't think the garage was open.
Okay.
And I
So,
actually jumped out of the car because I saw somebody following us. And then I
yeah,
jumped out like to say who this was, and they already were on the grass and everything with their cars.
yeah. Um, they did the same thing when they rearrested you about,
Yes.
you know, a month later or so, whatever it
I
was.
pulled
I
up
can't
with the
remember
cab.
exactly. Yeah. So, um, at the time that they came to arrest you, where they violated the law 10 ways to Sunday just before showing up already, because they had no legal standing to be there for that particular, for the reasons they stated. What
That's right.
what happened afterwards was they gained entry to the house, which they had no right to search. They had no, like I said, no search warrant. Um, and then they held you there, if I recall, for hours
Yes. While
in
they searched our house.
handcuffs
Yep.
in your foyer while they searched your house. And
Mhm.
they said they did a security sweep for their own safety, a safety
Yes.
sweep. But in fact, what they were doing was rifling through, and the house was virtually empty, as I recall. There was, you had just had it renovated. So there wasn't really any furniture in the house. There wasn't anything in there but the things you used on a day-to-day basis. The
That's
chair in
right.
the living room in front of the TV, things like that. There wasn't an elaborate setup. There was
No, not
virtually
yet.
nothing there. The bedrooms were all empty except for the room that you slept in, which had a bed. No dressers, no nothing for them to go
Nope.
through. So they ended up, when they were doing their security sweep, going through things that were secured in your closet. One of them was the first gun that they found was in a shopping bag, if you recall. And you had folded the handles under so that it could fit under the shelf.
That's
So the
exactly
gun
right.
was, yeah, so the gun wasn't visible. But they went into that bag to look for it. That nobody's hiding in that bag that's going to harm them. So that was their first failure on the search.
And let me stop you there for 1 second. As a matter of fact, Judge Buchwald, who was the judge on the case, uh, she actually said, "How do you get into the closet when you walk into that bedroom?" And she knew the layout of the house because she actually Googled it. Okay, she
Yeah,
actually asked me the size of it, and she says, "I'm sure Mr. Barone knows the size of his house." And I told her, "But you have to go into the room. You will open the door to get to the closet. You had to close the door to open the other doors coming towards you."
right.
So I told her what was I described to her in the shelves, if you remember the shelves that were there, and the bag was a Lloyd and Taylor bag, small one, maybe about 10, maybe 15 inches, 10 inches, whatever. But it had those long wire hangers. In order for me to fit it under the shelf with the gun in it and everything, plus I had paper on top of the gun, like I had that uh,
Tissue paper.
tissue paper, yes, exactly right. It was pink actually, and I had to fold the wires, the handles across
Handle.
each other, and then I slid it under that last shelf that was there in the middle. So he said it was right there out in broad daylight, and he said he saw something shiny. And I want to make a point. I want to let my fans know because my fans have been really loyal to me, and I appreciate everybody that listens, and also their feedback. I really want that. I'm letting everybody know this is coming from somebody firsthand on the legal team itself that went through everything with me step by step, day by day, hour by hour almost. I mean, it was like, and so this is how dirty the government really is. They will lie about you no matter what. Now, I understand sometimes a little bit they want to blemish the truth, but I was a informant for 18 years, never have lied to them. Always information was accurate. I
Yeah, we'll
mean,
talk about your 302s in a bit. I
yes,
honestly, um, the the thing with the FBI is they have a pat set of behavior. So they behave the same way with every person they arrest. Anytime they arrest you or threaten to arrest you, they'll tell you you're going to do 20 years. You'll never see your
mhm,
family again. You'll never, it's the same spiel with every single person. So
that's right.
anybody out there who's listening, who is, God forbid, tied up with their mess, they're going to say that to you, to your family, to your wife. They'll tell her that you have girlfriends on the side. They'll mention
Mhm,
women's names. They'll do anything they can do to get you to go turn against your family member or your loved one. And they'll
that's
do
right.
everything to try to frighten you into. And the only reason that their prosecution rate is so high, their conviction rate is so high, is because number one, most people can't afford to fight them. I believe it costs you close to $400 million to fight them.
400,000.
But in the end, but I'm
Yep.
saying, which is astronomical.
Yeah.
And against, they don't care whether the charges are legitimate or not. They don't care if they're destroying lives and livelihoods and families. They don't care. They want the conviction, and they know that the average person cannot afford to defend themselves. So all they have to do is trump up some charges, and they're not using that. That's, you know, an ironic term in the end because of all they've done to the president. But ultimately, they make up charges. They can destroy your life. They will destroy your family structure. They will cause, turmoil and chaos and havoc for everyone involved. And they don't care. And they don't
No.
issue apologies when they're wrong. They don't care. So,
And this is
you
the
know,
free country, America, the
well,
civilized
yeah,
world.
but they've weaponized their hero against America and American citizens. It's
Hmm.
become a weapon against innocent people. Not to say that they don't convict guilty people. We know that they do that. But
Hmm.
they also, when they want something else, in your instance, they wanted your knowledge and your information. They didn't know how to handle you because they weren't
No.
Vinny Prezzuti, who was your handler for 18 plus years.
Oh, you
They
remember his
weren't,
name?
yeah, of course, of course. So, um, they weren't him. They
No.
didn't know he knew how to handle you. He knew how you worked and how you worked most productively for the FBI. The way that C5 worked, that was the unit that arrested you.
That's
The
right.
way that they worked is they had to have something over your head in order to leverage you to work for them. They
Yep.
didn't know how you worked. They didn't care that you've never worn a wire. They didn't care that you had never testified. They didn't care that your persona and all of your information was private and protected by Vinny for all those years. It was productive for him to do that because he wouldn't have been as successful an agent without that. If you weren't working the streets for him, his career probably would have, you know, been half of what it ended up being before
That's
he
right.
retired. So, they didn't know how to deal with that situation and handling you, and they did everything wrong. Every single thing they did was wrong in handling you. If
Hmm.
they had just come, and you and I had this conversation several times when we could talk during the trial. Uh, I sat many, many nights with Jose Muniz, who was your defense attorney,
Hmm.
and discussed how they dealt with things. And it was so easy to find their weaknesses. And in fact, there was something that came up. Well, let's go back to the suppression because let's finish that, and then we can get on to all this other crazy stuff with your 302s and everything else.
Okay.
So the second gun that they found, and this was a funny story in court. I remember this, and even the jury laughed at it because the FBI agents that had you held hostage in your house for hours,
Yeah.
handcuffed in your foyer, had asked you where was the second gun, and what did you tell them?
Oh yeah. They asked me if there was any more guns. I said, all right, there's one more in the iron box. It's in the garage. And
So
the guy, go ahead.
yeah, so they spent a good hour looking for this iron box in the garage. But they did it. They're looking for this metal lock box or some kind of metal
Yeah.
toolbox. And it turned out it was a physical iron, like that you iron your pants. What if?
Yeah. I
So, yeah,
I was able to fit the gun in the box because it was big because it's held a regular iron. So when
right.
I said it's in the iron box, even Judge Buckwall was laughing at it. She was
Yeah,
she thought it was hysterical. She says she just shook her head because they said, "Well, it was in the iron box, but just not the iron box we thought it was in." And they kept coming back to me in the foyer like 2 or 3 times. "Are you sure you got iron box? You lying to us? Are you lying to us?" And I said, "It's in the iron box." But see, that's how good I hid the gun. And actually, Judge Buckwald had mentioned that. She says he knew he wasn't allowed to have guns, so he didn't display them out in the open. He made sure nobody found them. And look, they looked for it and they couldn't find it for like it was almost an hour. That's why she
yeah.
knew that the guy said one of the agents said that he saw the something shiny sticking out of the bag, and that was a total
That
lie
was a
right
lie.
there.
She
She
could
was pretty
picture in her.
smart.
Yes,
Yeah.
but she could picture in her head exactly what you were describing, that it was this
Yes.
paper shopping bag with the wire handles, like those cord handles, and you had to fold them under to stick it under that shelf. And so she said, I could understand you looked in the closet. She said, but remember, she pointed out too, when she was trying to she gave them every chance possible
Yeah.
to validate their reasons for being in the house. Did you see somebody looking through the blinds? She must have asked them that 10 times
Yeah.
at the trial.
Sh-
Did you see
She'll.
somebody looking through the blinds so that you thought someone was in the house? No.
Yeah.
And
She
they
said,
said
"Did you
no.
hear a toilet flush?"
Did you hear a toilet flush? Did you hear a
Yeah.
noise? Did you check the basement and the attic? No. They
Yeah.
only
That's
searched the
right.
main floor. And she said, if you were seriously doing a safety check to make sure there was nobody in the house that was going to harm you or your personnel, why wouldn't you check the attic and the
Exactly.
basement?
And the legal term, if I remember, I think she says that they call it a protective sweep.
Mhm.
And that's only
Yeah,
lasts a protective sweep is no longer than 5 minutes, 6 max, she said.
yeah, and they were in there for hours. So
Yes.
yeah, and they didn't find the only thing they found were the two guns, and that's where the case law came in because they were able to. And I just want to clarify, Joe, I'm not going to use legal terms because I know that there are a lot of laymen that watch your show. So I'm
Okay.
not trying to be, you know, Biggie the brain, the legal whatever. I just want to make things clear for people who are watching and listening
Appreciate it.
to your
Appreciate it.
program because it's important that they understand how the FBI is working against American citizens and against America. And that's also why I'm not, um, disclosing my identity because the things that they've done, we've seen it done to people in power. We've seen it done to all kinds of to journalists, to all kinds of people who go against their grain.
Mhm.
And that's not the way the legal system is supposed to function. The DOJ
No.
is a hot mess. We have corrupt judges. We have a judge that just put a male rapist in a prison with women because he said he identifies as a guy or as a female and couldn't justify, there's a lot of stuff going on that's just doesn't make sense. I mean, the guy's a
Right.
rapist and you put him in a women's prison. Smart. Good job, Judge. So this is what's going on with the DOJ at this time. And even,
But I
this
do
was
have
in
to give a little
2010.
credit. Yes, but I do have to give a little credit to Judge Buchwald. If you remember in the beginning of my when I first was with her, like when I first was, got to court and everything like that, she actually was more on the FBI side, except when she read my all my stuff that I did over the years, and
Yeah, the transcript from the FBI.
yes, she had said, "Well, what did Mr. Barone contribute to what did he do for 18 years?" He said, "Well, they said they gave a little some license plates, numbers, some phone numbers, no, but not
Yeah, that
really
was in
much." She
his
says,
closing. That was in
"Yeah,
his closing in
exactly.
Zach's
Yeah."
closing. The
And
the
then the file was how big when they looked, they says, "Well," she said, "Whoa, I want to see that in camera." But if you remember how her demeanor changed when she came out after reading what I did and after
right.
all the things I did, yeah.
But a big part of that also that I saw going through the whole process was that you didn't have representation. Even though you had a lawyer, Roy Koltzar was a con artist and a scammer. And he believed that it was okay to steal from his clients because he said, well, they're criminals. That's how he justified it.
Yes.
They're charged with a crime, so it's okay if I rob them of money. Um, and you didn't have someone in there. I remember being in the early parts of the case and Roy coming into court and coming late, which is disrespectful to the judge,
Mhm.
um, and the defense, and also to the prosecutors, but also
And to me.
standing in court and yeah, well, you're the defense,
Yeah,
and
oh, okay.
standing in court, standing in court and reciting poetry rather than you know using using legal cases, using case law. He was standing in court, reciting poetry. And I remember just sitting there shaking my head. And the number of meetings that I had with him, he was just a slimy. I would leave and I would feel like, if I got to go take a shower now, because I was around somebody that was so grimy
Yeah.
that, he was just, But
Well, I got him disbarred later on, as you remember.
yes, yes, I helped with that to some degree,
Mhm.
um, with the letters to the review board, and he he had committed so many atrocities against other people that were his clients that it all built up. He was
Yeah.
stealing money. Even when he was suspended, when we were doing his going through the disbarment process, it came out that he was still going down to the MCD, or what is it? Metropolitan
MDC.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
He, that he was still going down there and taking retainers from people to
I know.
represent them when he
And he wasn't
wasn't
even supposed
even
to be practicing. That's right.
practicing. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, and again, he justified it in his hearings with when they were reviewing his license and determining whether he was going to be disbarred, that he justified it by saying, well, they're criminals, so it doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah, it was
I,
easy to get rid of him.
yeah, yeah, you
He
were
still
very
owes me
fortunate.
$89,000.
Yeah, I know. I worked with Jose on that to try to get that back, and you know, Jose was kind of lackluster about it. I think attorneys going up against other attorneys is not, it's kind of taboo. So, and it doesn't
W
matter if they're disbarred. And then Jose
No.
had his own legal issues. So,
Well, the lawyer's fund who I went through was actually corrupt, if you ask me too, because I had all the paperwork. I had it with my fiance at that time. I think we were married by then, and so uh, we what do you call? We put all the paperwork together. She kept all the photocopies of the canceled checks I gave him, all the letters he wrote. There was the proof that they needed was more than enough to give me back my money. But because I was, a crook, criminal, like, they talk to the FBI. The FBI says do whatever you can not to pay them. I know that, and so there it is. They kept trying to retry me all the time.
yeah, I read some of those decisions, and their decision was based on the testimony of the prosecution, which
Mhm.
was disproved in court at your trial. It was proved to be false, and they still used that or those arguments. Um, I remember, so there was a point in I'm not sure if it was in the pretrial, but where the prosecution was stating that you were planning to kidnap Sam's kid,
Oh,
and
yeah,
I remember passing a note to Jose saying, "The kid is Joe's age. He's not a kid. It's a slang term. It's not, And he had to stand up because when the court heard that, everybody kind of went, "Oh my
well,
God, that's horrible." And I was like, "You got to clarify this now because that's going to sit with them that he was going to kidnap a child."
Well,
You
I
know,
was in my 40s. His son was, I think, 30s. Like he was younger than me, but he was in his 30s. But that's the kind of way I spoke. I said the guy said this kid, that's just this slang street talk. That's all it is.
right? But Jose was not
Yeah.
aware of that, using that terminology, that slang talk.
Hmm.
And I remember passing him a note and saying, that it's a kid. When he says kid, he's talking about a grown man. He's not talking about a child, because they were so appalled at the thought of you kidnapping a child that it
Right.
shaded their whole perception of you. And
It
so I
did.
was like, you got to clarify this and tell them, it's a grown man, it's slang. And then they all kind of breathed a sigh of relief because they wanted to
Yeah.
like you. They wanted to be on your side. They wanted to, support the you captivated the jury and the judge and any spectator in there. When they put Mike Brooks on the stand, I remember a reporter from the New York Daily News said to me, when he left the courtroom, we're all safer now that he's gone. That was their key. That was their key witness, and
I know.
he should have been a witness for us. I remember at some point Jose sent me a correspondence from them. It was a scanned letter, I guess, or one of your 302s that you had
Okay.
reported 10 years prior about Tony Polero, and
Mhm.
it. then he made a note on it. He's going to do it at his own. Joe's going to do this at his own discretion. He didn't use your name, obviously,
Mhm.
but he said he's going to decide at his own discretion whether this is a legitimate thing or not, because there was, he had talked to you at that time about a murder for hire, and so
That's a
yeah,
good point.
when John Sachs submitted that to the defense, we were laughing because we're like, is he arguing our case for us? Because it was, I'm going to use, it was bullshit then and it's bullshit now, you know?
Well, what
Oh,
happened was, don't forget, I think John Zach and there was another guy, Ken Polite. Uh,
yeah.
they took care. They came after Miriam Roker. Miriam Roker is one of she was evil, okay, and she still came
Oh,
to the
yeah.
courtroom. Yeah, and she was kind of dictating to what they do, but they knew they were doing something wrong because I had asked Agent Gator he was the FBI one of the leading on the thing, and I said, let me ask you a question. I said, I saved the judge's life, I saved the USA's life, Greg Andreas, Judge Garifas. I says, that doesn't mean anything to you. I don't get a pass, and he just shook his head like, nope, he didn't even care about his own.
Nope. No, they
Yep.
don't. Like I said, their whole thing is to keep their numbers up. I think I don't know if it's still the same because I haven't checked it in a long time, but I think they had a 95% conviction rate. Well, it's easy to convict people when you have them plead out. They plead,
Right.
because they're afraid or they can't afford to fight. That's one thing. And I can tell you in the cases that I've had against the FBI where they have wrongly accused somebody of a crime, we have won all of those cases. Because
Mm.
if you have the money to fight and the fortitude to do it, you can prove what they're doing is corrupt. And it's just a matter of being able to do that and having the minds. We had a great legal team. We had a lot of, very smart people working to get you out of that mess. And what it came down to was that looking at the details, the timelines of things didn't add up. But Mike Cooks had submitted the video that he took of the
Yeah.
place where he was supposed to go. And in the video, in his testimony, he said it was cold and there was snow on the ground and all of this. But in the video, there were leaves on the trees and it was in Connecticut. There's no way there were leaves on the trees and snow on the ground at the same time. It was
That's
very
right.
green and sunny and whatever. That's how long they didn't want. That's the disparaging timeline that they presented because he went in the summer and then and they weren't the two leaves weren't even turning. He went in the summer, but they didn't arrest you until January. So
That's
they
right.
couldn't justify the urgency in not having the warrants, and they couldn't if they had told the truth. And I had also passed a note to Jose about that. I don't think it came up, but it was a huge point to make that there was no urgency because the whole conversation was dead. It wasn't even an issue.
Right.
By the time that they arrested you, it was already months past, several months past.
Oh,
So there
easy.
was no,
Yeah.
yeah. Mike Cooks was a notorious for using the NYPD as an ATM. He would,
But that came
you
out in
know,
trial too.
yeah, and he didn't care. Jose was great when he asked him about uh, the money that the FBI was giving him. They were giving him money every month to keep him under wraps. And
Mhm.
then, he was also collecting welfare at the time. And Jose was like, well, did you report? No, it's none of their business. Did you report it to them? Then you had income. And he's like, it's none of their business. Oh,
But
he was a winner.
yeah, no, he also said that he says, I don't want them in my business. What about the guy he shot? And he shot him in the butt. And the guy had to use a bag to go to the bathroom. He said, did you help the guy? Did you, and all of that stuff too? And he said, nah. He says, I didn't care what happened to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, he was a great witness for the defense. He really
Oh,
was
without a
because
doubt.
he was so abrasive. His personality was horrible, and he was just a thug. And like I said, that reporter from the Daily News, I don't remember who it was,
Mhm.
but he just, everybody was just like, or even easier after he left the courtroom. That's for sure.
Without a doubt. Yeah, people were scared of him. Even the marshal said to me, "What are you doing hanging around a guy like that?" But I used him in a lot of ways to just build up my street cred to keep that, I was hanging around because listen, he's a legitimate tough guy in his own right too, But when he
Yeah.
did testify for me, I couldn't believe when he was telling the truth up there. I said, 90% of his testimony was for
The
me,
defense.
and I couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, you
Oh,
know.
you could see the prosecution sinking down in their seats. If oh my God, I can't believe we put this guy on the stand. But they didn't
Yeah,
never expect you to go to trial either. They never expected
no.
you to take the defensive stand that you took, where you were
Well,
authorized to do what you were doing. So they never expected that. And it was crystal clear in your 302s. Vinny Prizzuti had made a point to list out all of the crimes and criminal activity that you could discuss with criminals in order to gain information. And he even put that he couldn't list them all there. He wrote that in his 302 for you,
yeah.
that he couldn't even list all of the crimes that you were, and any other, it was just like any other crimes that you could possibly think of. He's
Mhm.
authorized to discuss these things. So, I mean, there were so many damning pieces of evidence against the prosecution's case with the suppression hearing. The illegal search and seizure. They had no business being in your house. There was absolutely no reason. The judge said that too. You could have just arrested him in the driveway if it was such an urgent need, but they had no warrants.
Yep.
There was absolutely no cause for what they did, with the exception of personal gain.
And if I don't mind, if you don't mind, I want to also tell everybody I'm gonna put that my that the testimony and everything like that. I'm gonna put that on my Patreon channels for people to view for themselves if they want to look at it, because it's worth the read, especially since it's in the law books now. And I also want to touch on the fact that how the prosecution, how they didn't want, how the assistant U.S. attorneys and everything, when they were talking to Mike Cooks, and how they were sinking low in the seat. This is the FBI themselves, when it says the United States of America against Joe Barone. What did I do to
Yeah.
America? I'm one
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. Uh, well, that's a standard in the courts. Obviously, there are a lot of things about, and just to clarify, I'm not a lawyer. I just want to be clear. I worked on the team. I helped with the
Mhm.
research. I helped with the arguments, those types of things. But I want to be clear, I'm not a lawyer. So if my terminology is off, or if I'm, whatever, I'm not going to use whatever legal terms I know, and I'm not going to profess to be an attorney. But I just want to be clear that the things that they did were complete violations of the Constitution, of your
Mhm.
civil rights. They violated you every way possible. And I know that their practice is to throw as much at the wall, as many charges at you as possible, and then see what sticks. Well, when you get a corrupt judge, we were very fortunate that we got Judge Buchwald, because
Mhm.
she was a fair-minded judge. She was against you from the very beginning, until she saw your record, until things started to come out. I believe your fiance at the time was sending her faxes and messages and telling her constantly, like, because your attorney wasn't defending you. Roy Kolksar was not providing a
Well,
defense.
and neither did George Santangelo, but he was a wise guy. He represented a lot of wise guys. So what I did was I hired him, gave him 45,000 cash, and then I hired him because I wanted to keep up my persona that I was still a wise guy. I mean, I knew he was going to find out later on, and then of course, it was going to come out that I was an informant for all those years. But I just figured for the first part, as long as I can get bail, then I think I could work with something. You know what I mean? But they totally went against that as well.
Well,
He
he
stole my
wasn't
money
going
too.
to. Yeah,
No,
he wasn't going to represent you once he found out that you had been a cooperating witness or a
no.
CI for them. That his goal was to inform the mafia of what you had done, and also just to get your money. As I recall, he even sent people down to the prison to talk to you.
hmm
Is that
Um, it,
correct?
it was not George actually too. George had talked to a guy named Patty Felsetti, who was like a concierge now in the Genovese crime family. And so when he came up to visit me, he said, "By the way, Patty Boy says to say hello." So that means, F you know what I mean? But also,
Yeah.
the other guy that sent somebody was Murray Richmond's office, was another guy. They called him Joe Bacala. He was with my cousin George in the Lucchese crime family, and they sent these guys, these lawyers, to help me, to represent me. But it wasn't only just to help me. They just wanted to know if I was going to go and become more than, they didn't know I was an informant yet at that time, but they were sniffing around to see if I did. And I said, no, I got an attorney. Thanks, like that. But that was my cousin George, is the one you're thinking of.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wasn't that close to that part of it. I just
Right.
remember the conversations
It's
we
a long
had with
time ago
Jose.
too. Yeah,
It
it's a
is.
long time ago.
It's well over a decade. So I
Mhm.
believe your trial was in 2010, July of 2010. So
Yes,
yeah.
it was.
So as far as as far as the suppression, that was a complete beat down because those were really the only legitimate charges they had against you were the guns because you were a felon in possession of weapons. So when they lost that part of it, the legs came right out from underneath them and
That's right.
everything else. They were scrambling in court to make anything sound legitimate, and there was nothing. Like you said, with Cooks on the stand, it was like he was a witness for the defense. I remember in his testimony, Jose said to him, "Well, why did you go to the police?" He said, "Well, because I was scared. I was afraid." And then later on in his testimony, Jose asked him something else, and he's like, "I'm not afraid of him." He just kept contradicting. Where do you recall when he tried to
Yeah.
plead the fifth? He was halfway through his testimony, and he tried to plead the fifth. Do you
Yeah,
remember that?
exactly. Yes, I do remember that. Yeah, that's
And
good
the whole
reminding me.
courtroom was
Thanks.
like, the whole courtroom started laughing. We were all like, "What? You can't. You're a witness for the prosecution. You can't plead the fifth."
Well, do you remember
And
when I was waiting in the bullpen in the back, and I didn't know anybody can hear me back there? And what was I whistling back then? I don't know if you were in the courtroom then, and the
if I
judge was
only
like,
had a, if I only had a brain
"Yeah,
from the
I was
Wizard of Oz,
here. I am fighting for my life."
I'm,
Yeah, I mean,
uh,
and I was whistling in the back, and the whole courtroom was like laughing, right?
the judge shook her head. She didn't even know what to make of it. She was like, "Oh, I think the jury was still just walking out too. They weren't they hadn't completely cleared the courtroom. They were kind of siphoning into the jury room." And
Mhm.
so, like, the ones on the tail end of it caught that, which was
Yeah.
kind of funny, which is why I
Well,
think she was
didn't
shaking her head.
didn't she cry during my testimony too? If you remember that, I think you were there for that too. It was my trial, so you
Yeah,
were there.
I heard that from several people. I was
Mhm.
taking notes and they're documenting things, testimonies, so I wasn't really
Oh, okay.
paying attention to what she was doing. Um, but I did know that she was deeply moved. You could see that in her reactions and when she was wrapping up for the day. I recall also when you got the verdict of not guilty, they tried to pursue the second charge on you. They couldn't get it on you,
Conspiracy.
but but they got it. They couldn't get it on. And she's like, if you couldn't win this, you're not going to win that. And she
Yes.
told them, like, don't even bother. You guys brought a bullshit into the courtroom. You muddied the water here, and disrespected the system. And I think that bothered her a lot. How disrespectful they were to the system with
And
that
and you
case.
and you know what else I thought was disrespectful? When they came to shake my hand after I got found not guilty. I didn't wanna shake their hand, but Jose looked at me and said, shake their hand like that." And I didn't want to, but he said, "Show yourself to be better." Because when I went to go pick up, I had $55,000 they took out of my safe, and, I had to go to the FBI building in New York, so they wouldn't even allow Jose to come upstairs. I had to go by myself. So one of the guys over there, he says, "Oh, this isn't over." I says, "Oh yeah, it is." They thought I was going to be scared. I said, "I'm not scared now because you ain't got nothing on me now."
Yeah.
And even surrounded by them, I wasn't scared. Punks.
Before you got up and testified, honestly,
Mm,
there it was kind of 50-50. When you got
mhm,
on the stand and testified, I remember having a conversation with Jose during a break, and he said, "Should I take him off the stand?" And it was a Friday. And I
mm.
said, "No, keep him on the stand till the end of the day. Let the jury go home and marinate on his testimony because it's important that they leave with his words in their brain and not, a witness for the defense or
Yeah.
or them." you know, cross.
Well, that's good that you brought that up too, because you want to know something, Jose. Like I guess they tried to probably talk to Mike Cooks about telling him what to say and stuff like that. But when Jose, he never prepped me or prepared me for the trial. All he said was this, Joe. He says, "Look, nobody knows your case better than you." He says, "Just go in there and talk to the jury like you're talking to somebody in your living room and they're sitting on the couch." I said, "Okay." He said, "Just that's all you have to do." And so if you remember, I actually turned from the where the people sit, I turned where the jury sits. So my back was almost towards
The
Judge
judge.
Buchwald. Yeah, the judge, yes. And I was facing the jury because I had my clear glasses on at the time because I still wanted to see them. I couldn't see them. And these are prescription too. And so and I apologize, but the lights are bright in here. But I wanted them to see my eyes. I wanted them to look into my soul, that I was everything I was telling them was the truth.
Yeah, and I remember also, and they knew when you
Mhm,
were talking to them that everything you were saying was sincere. They
mhm.
felt your pain when you talked about your father. They felt your frustration when you were talking about the FBI and how they handled you. They felt they were right there with you. That's what swayed everything. It wasn't their witnesses. It wasn't our witnesses. It was your testimony that swayed them. That's really what pushed it over the edge. Like I said, it was 50-50 before you got on that stand. But when you get on that standpoint, you know, like Jose said, just sit up there and tell the truth. Tell your
You
backstory.
exactly. You know what really sad though, how the government exposed me. They're supposed to protect me. That I know they offered me and my fiance at that time the witness protection program. I think like 3 different times, but how why would I? She even said, why would he take the antidote from the same people who gave him the poison? Because how do you trust
You
these
put
people
you,
anymore?
yeah, you can't. You couldn't because they weren't going to let you go. You beat them and they
Hmm.
weren't going to let you go. So even if you did go into what's that, they would have tried to find other ways to get you, you know,
Yeah, to set me up. They were
time,
actually
yeah,
trying to set
get you
me up.
tied up.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
exactly.
they Yeah, they don't like to lose, and you beat them, but not only did you beat them, you pummeled them. You know, your case was the whole thing should have honestly made the law books, because what they did and what they're allowed to do, what they get away with is so unconstitutional, and it's just so morally and ethically wrong. They're so corrupt. They're so
Well,
corrupt.
they threw me in the box for 15 months. They tried to kill me in there. I wound up getting MRSA staph infection. I almost died. They cut me open 3 different times. If you remember when they sent me out to the judge ordered me to go to the hospital, but they
Yeah,
tried to circumvent her order just to appease the court and try to get them out of it. They didn't care that my heart was skipping beats and everything like that. They didn't care. I
no, they
I
don't.
I'm
And they were mad.
220. I'm sorry.
They were mad at you.
They
They were
were
mad at
because
you because you wouldn't give up Tony Polero because you knew he wasn't guilty. You
that's
knew it
right.
was a BS conversation. In fact, I remember when they were playing the recordings in court of your, you know, taped conversations with him when they made you wear a wire on him, that you two were having two completely different conversations.
That's right.
He was talking about home invasions in Eastchester, and you were
Mhm,
talking about the murder for hire, and saying, you were saying, oh no, that thing, that thing's not, you were talking about the thing, and he was
mhm.
talking about a whole other thing, and that was so obvious in those tapes.
I know it was sad how they just really tried to they screw it around or they take pieces of it, but you could see it. Even Ed McDonald, I didn't really care for Ed McDonald that much, and I know he didn't like me either. But you know something, he asked me the questions. They came to see me in the what is it? They have a meeting between co-defendant meetings is what they can have. And they
Mhm.
said, listen, can you do this? Can you say that? I said, listen, Tony, don't worry about it. Tony was scared. Tony was afraid because Tony was facing 10 years like I was. And
Yeah,
so, and I understand why he's scared, you know what I'm saying? But, I said, don't worry, Tony, I'm just going to tell the truth. Don't worry about anything, and he was afraid. And then, Ed McDonald told him to talk to me like that because it's unethical for Ed to ask me, to do these kind of things. But he had a conversation too with my fiance then too, and stuff. But listen, he didn't take the stand I did. and that was a long time on that stand.
Yeah, we had you stay up there for the full day, so that
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it was like I said, it was a Friday. We wanted the jury to go home, to be that courtroom with your words on their brain, not somebody else's. Not with the cross and them trying to dissect what you said and turn it into something else. Because one of their biggest games, one of the biggest things that they do, is they use semantics, and they use words that are aggressive words that make people think certain things when it's not really what it is. Like when they were talking about the fire in the house, right?
Uh,
They were saying somebody's home, where their kids live, where they're raising their family. No, it was an empty house. There was
right.
nothing there. If you recall, that was a big thing, but it was about the way that they word things.
But
Saying, "Oh, he was gonna abduct Sam's kid." Yeah, Sam's kid is a grown man.
right.
It's the language that they use to make you look like a villain in order
Exactly.
to to paint a picture for the jury that makes them want to convict you.
Well, in the fire, the only thing that burnt in the house was the mattress. It just made a lot of smoke.
Yeah,
Nothing
yeah,
else happened to the house except the smell.
yeah, right. And the house was empty. It was nobody was living in the house.
And that was all
So
for show too.
yeah, and that was when you explained that to the jury, because I remember in your testimony you explained
Mhm.
that in greater detail than
Yes.
when they were trying to make a thing out of it, with their witnesses. The jury got it. They're like, okay, so he's undercover for the FBI. He's got to keep up appearances for these people. Nobody was going to be harmed. A little
Mhm.
property damage isn't the worst thing that could happen. It's like vandalism. It's not, it's a misdemeanor.
That's
It's
right.
not a federal crime. So, and that resonated with them. They really listened to you when you were talking up there. They
They
were
did.
hanging on every word.
Well, think about it too. How do you give me all these rules to do that I can't do, but yet I have to still play the part of a gangster or a wannabe coming a guy coming up in the life or whatever? You mean to tell me I'm hanging around with 2, 3 guys and we get into a fight in a bar or wherever we are? Am I supposed to run into the bathroom and hide? You know,
Right.
how am I supposed to say, "Yeah, we're gonna do these things"? On a couple occasions, I went with Dominic. You must remember Dominick Cicale was my captain. I, I,
Yep.
I went with I went with him to do certain things. What was I supposed to do? Say no, I can't make it. I got a cold, or I can't do this. They want you to get the information, but yet I'm limited to how I do it. And now I was there was a hit. Dominic had gotten the green light to kill Mikey Washwoman, the Nose Mancuso. I have to say Washwoman because that's his new nickname Dominic gave. So I don't yeah, so I don't know if you remember him or whatever, but I had told the FBI that this guy's going down. And they said, "Well, do what you got to do, Joe, to protect yourself, but just let us know right afterwards so that this way we can protect you." Protect me? How you going to protect me? I just put a bullet in this guy. I
Yeah.
probably would have
So
shot him after Dominic because Dominic hated him more than me, but
that well, that was a big part of your testimony too,
yeah,
was that when Vincent Prizzuti got on the stand, they didn't believe a word he was saying. And
no.
when they asked him, if you recall, because the way that he got you to work with him was those photos of your father's exhumed body decaying, all of this stuff. Um, when Jose asked him about that, is did he show you those pictures? He denied it on the stand. He perjured
Yeah,
himself on the stand. And you
yeah,
could tell because he kind of giggled when he said it. He was like,
yep,
no, like it was so blatantly obvious. And he also, I mean, he didn't downplay what you had done. He said it. You helped put away 200 and some odd burglars, thieves, whatever it was. They weren't personal friends of yours. They weren't people that you
no,
necessarily had relationships with, but they were people you had encountered and things that you had heard on the street.
mhm,
And, and that was enough for them. They to piece together cases against these people. You didn't
right,
have any direct, your information to them was not total or complete. It was
that's right.
pieces of things of ongoing investigations they had, and it helped to put the final piece in a puzzle or put another piece in a puzzle. So when people say about you being a rat or you being this or that, it's easy to say negative things about somebody that you don't know. Um, but if you understood what was actually transpiring, you helped them close cold cases, families who lost loved ones. In
Hmm.
some cases, innocent people, not mob members, but who got hit for bad business deals or, something that didn't go some gangster's way. You were able to provide those families with closure and peace
Yeah.
because their loved ones were dead and they had no idea who had committed the crime or where, even in some cases, where the people were. There was so many things that you were able to help them with over the years that were virtuous things. They weren't, I'm not making you a saint by any stretch of the imagination, Joe. You know, we both know you're not. But but the fact is that you provided pieces of information to them that help them close cases and give families peace of mind and put their loved ones to rest. Because when you have all those unknowns, there you never stop thinking about it. Now, will they ever get over the loss of their loved one? Probably not. But
No.
at least they have some closure as to what actually transpired and who did it and
Well,
why.
exactly. And you know something? I never did anything to my friends. I had friends of mine out there in the street and I knew what they were doing. I never said anything about any of them. Not everybody I knew what they were doing. There was some things, one of my friends asked me, I said, "Did you ever tell me anything about what you were doing? Did we ever do anything together? How could I go up there and lie? If you had the fortitude to go there and face your accuser, that would have been me. So you never did that, and it wouldn't have been me anyways. I wouldn't have been there because I didn't know what you were doing. But I knew other guys that were selling drugs and doing this and doing that, but I didn't care. I'm not gonna go against my friends. These people that I didn't know. The only people I got close to back in those days was of course everybody knows Dominic and my rapport with him, Dominick Cicale, and he was my captain. And of course, there was Anthony Donato, Anthony Aiello. I like them guys. Uh, Vinny Gorgeous. These type of people. Those I just kind of gravitated to them. Of course, I knew Big Ernie Mascarelli and everything like that. But and those kinds of people. Tough Tony from the Park Side who passed away too. I mean, there's a look. There was Jerry Chili when I was in prison. He was a great guy. Helped me out. He called the minute they came to lock me up and throw me in the hole, he called up his wife to tell her to call my fiance at that time to let everybody know I was in the box. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have found out for like at least a week or two. So, something, to be honest with you, all those other people, they're cutthroats, they're out for themselves, and I didn't know them. So, as far as I'm concerned, I wanted to find out what happened to my father. And I didn't expect to make any friends along the way, except, I did get close with Dominic, and he's still my friend to this day. And I'll do
Yeah.
anything for him, just like he'd do anything for me.
Yeah, and that's a big part that a lot of people don't know. They
Mhm.
when they hear that somebody was an informant, they automatically assume you did something horrible and you're trying to lessen your burden for the mistakes you made by giving up the other guys who were involved in that
Right,
crime and
right,
that capo, right? But that's not your situation. And one of the things that Jose and I um, stressed a lot during your trial was that was that was a big difference between what C5 was used to handling.
right.
C5 was used to guys, they'd pick you up, you committed a crime, like your first bit when you got picked up choking out that guy. And, they physically saw you choking out this guy.
Yeah,
So, and if you had other guys with you that were doing it, it would be like you gave those guys up. But you didn't
right.
do that. That wasn't the
No,
case. You didn't. There wasn't a big caper that you were involved in that they needed to use that to flip you. You flipped because of your father, and
yeah,
and, and all of this. It resonated with Jose. It resonated with myself and other members of the defense team, and we had a big team behind you. We had a
yes,
lot of people behind you. I can still remember we filled that little tiny bar that was around the corner from the courthouse. We packed that place with just
yeah.
our people. Just the defense team was packed.
I don't
You
know how
know,
good
and
the food was, but it sure felt a lot better from what I was eating for that last 19 months that I was in there. And I and I wanna say one other thing. let me see what somebody else is going to do if they found out that they're or heard or suspected or was told, whatever you want to say, if their father was murdered, what they would do. Now, you get all kinds of people say, I do this, I do that. Yeah, okay. We all could say that after the fact, okay?
Yeah,
Just
everybody's
like
a
the guys.
keyboard tough guy.
Yeah, just like the guy gets in the ring and he goes, "Oh, the first round, I'm gonna play with him a little bit. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that." Then as soon as he gets hit with a punch, the whole fight game
Oh, wait,
changes. You know what I mean? Look,
exactly, exactly. Until, and this, I mean, this is true of anything until somebody actually experiences an event for themselves. If it's not direct, until it actually directly affects them or someone they love, they have no idea what their reaction is going to be. I
what
know I can tell you, I have some hobbies, and there are people that claim they're going to be able to do this, and this in a, you know, an emergency situation or in a stressful situation, and completely freeze up. They're like deer in headlights. They have
Yep,
no idea what to do. So nobody
yep.
knows until the pressure's on them what actually it's going to work for them, what they're going to be capable of.
I'm sitting in
That's
the
the
bullpen in MCC, and I was on this one floor, and then once it got outed that I was an informant, they had to move me from another floor because there was threats on my life, obviously. And so then I was on the floor with this guy, he's a wise guy, Joe Waverly, and I had just a few words with him, nothing bad. He didn't do anything. He was all talk because there was a couple of guys around him, but they didn't do anything. And anyways, uh, but I said to myself, I says, when I was in the bullpen, some of the guys that I was on the floor with previously, they walked by me, and one of the guys says to me, he says, "Joe, do whatever you got to do to get out of here. Good to see you again." He said, "This place is nothing but a hellhole," and
Yep.
something that made me feel pretty good when I heard that too.
Yeah, and if I recall, you had a friend from your first bit, Dean.
Yeah, Dean Cerati. Yep, my dear friend. I mean, this guy Dean and myself, we spent over a year together. I think yeah, over a year. No, more than a year because we not only was in Otisville together, then we went to Valhalla in White Plains because the federal government rented out a floor up there because the prisons were overcrowded. So we spent like a couple of years together. Okay, on my first bid, and so my fiance, he knew I was in contact with him, and she reached out to them, and we were still writing letters back and forth, him and I. So she flew him in, and so he's sitting. I went to the trial, and now I come out, and I seen her sitting there, and I said, "Who's this guy sitting close to her like that?" Like just looking, and I'm going like this. I said, "Oh my god," because he looks different now. I haven't seen him in. I guess I didn't see him in over 10 years, maybe more, 20, almost 20 years. So, because he still was doing time when I first went in, when I got out and released, and I sent him food. I sent him money. I wrote him letters and everything still while he was away. Well, don't you think it was him sitting there? I couldn't believe it. But when I saw him sitting there, it gave me the strength to just, when I went up on the stand to testify and I saw him there, besides the fact that I was, praying a lot with God and stuff, when I saw him, I was like, and he just nodded his head like this to me. And matter of fact, he's in one of the pictures I'm going to be, that my assistant's going to put on the screen for us, when it views it, after recorded. But yeah, when I saw him, that was it, man. It was a pleasure to see him after 20 years, but for him to be there by my side for the courtroom is something I'll never, ever forget. Dean Cerati, my real friend,
It's funny.
a brother.
He really was. I remember at the trial speaking with him briefly, and him saying to me, "Joe's kind of in this mess because of me." And I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "Well, when we met back in the day, I
Yeah,
told him, cooperate, work with them, do
yep,
whatever you got to do to get yourself out of here."
he did.
You reminded me of that when you said that about this guy. That, told you, just do whatever
Yeah.
you got to do to get out of here. This place is a hellhole.
Mhm.
I remember Dean telling me that, and that stuck with me because I was like, and here this guy is 20 years later showing up to your trial. He was there for your judgment, for the acquittal at the end,
Yep.
which
Yeah,
was
and
really cool that he was
yeah,
there for you. Like that he came, I remember because he told me, he's like, "I'm here for like, 48 hours or something," he said.
yep.
And I just needed to be here for Joe.
It made me feel like, first of all, it's just good to see somebody you haven't seen in 20 years or whatever, you know what I mean? But then to, that he came for you like that. I mean, see, he never forgot what all the stuff that we did together in the prison. We wrote poems, we wrote letters. I mean, and he was tough too. This guy Dean too. He was bigger than me. He's tougher than me. He used to do a different kind of martial arts than I did too. And we used to practice in the cell together. But he was tough. This guy, but he was smart, a little crazy, but he was smart. A good crazy, I guess you want to say. Uh, but he was, but to when I guess he says, oh, he told me what he wanted out of the groceries I would get him because he went from the federal back to the state because he started in the state prison, and so I took care of him as best I could, and I was making money, but I never forgot him, and I still never forget him. I hope to see him one day. I hope he gets to
Yeah,
see this air and tell him I miss him.
he's another one who got the shaft from the system because his time
Yeah.
was based on a bar fight, right? He got into a bar fight and him and this
Hmm.
other guy, and the guy got knocked down and ended up dying.
Hmm.
And he got 10 years for that. And just before his 10 years were up, they changed the law and they tacked on another 10 years and 3 months to his
I know.
sentence. So he was getting ready to get out, and they held him for another, they doubled his sentence, which was insane. And what the extra 3 months was, I don't know. But yeah, I got an opportunity to talk to him a little bit at the bar afterwards because
Uh,
there was just everybody was just so relieved, and all of us
yeah.
were so tired because it was a very, like a bum rush from the suppression to the trial to get you through everything and not having you they wouldn't grant you bail. So it was a struggle to get the information we needed from you. It was even at times that they turned the legal team away because the MDC had issued special orders when Vinny Baciano was out of his cell. Other Mafia members, quote unquote, couldn't get visitors because
Yep.
they didn't want, you know, people connected to the Mafia out in this solitary unit because it's a very small space.
It is.
It's three cells surrounded by plexiglass, a section in the center with the plexiglass in the middle so that you can't touch each other. You can only talk on the phone. And then the library was right behind that. And
Yeah.
it's all see-through. So he'd be in the library constantly, or he'd be in
Oh.
one of those three cells next to each other with legal people. So he was always out of his cell. And there was a day I remember a good part of us went down to the prison to meet with you and sat there for 8 hours because he was
Mhm.
out constantly and they would
Yeah.
not let us go upstairs while he was out. We had to fight with them and tell them we knew exactly why we weren't being allowed up. And it was because he was out of his cell. And we said, you can't violate one prisoner's rights because of
That's
another
right.
prisoner.
Well,
And
you
they
wanna know
finally let
something?
us up.
Yeah, I remember all of that stuff too because I was like, "When's the visit coming?" But Vinny said to me when I used to be able to get the chance to talk to him, he said, "I'm glad I came to the box." I said, "You are?" He goes, "Because if I was in population, I wouldn't be doing this work that I'm doing on my own case. Even though the lawyers are working and he's paying them big money, he still did a lot of legal work himself." Vinny was a real. I mean, he's the real deal too. I mean, he's the real tough guy too. I mean, he's no joke. And he talked to me. We had plenty of talks in there, and he still stood his ground. He was not like. I mean, he's the real deal. I mean, he's way tougher than I am, and I mean, in a lot of different ways too. Not just with his hands. I'm just saying like that. But he's the real deal. I mean, he told me there was a CEO in there, and I guess he had some words with him or whatever. So he went to go talk to Vinny again, and he says, "Hey, Vinny." So Vinny puts his head up like, like, yeah. He says, "Can I talk to you?" So when he like nods a little bit and he goes, man to man. And all of a sudden that was the worst thing that guy said because Vinny says, "Nah, you can't speak to me man to man because you got that blue shirt on. I don't consider you a man." You see, that's the kind of stuff I like in a person. I can respect that. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, I got you
But
on that. And we
I
got to
once
meet
want
him a couple of times on
yeah,
our visits with you because initially they didn't have that order out. And
right.
so we were able to get up there, whenever we needed to see you, we could come down and see you. And we met him and we got to meet John Jr., John Dottie Jr.
Mm.
And
Oh yeah, yeah. So John Jr.
and
too, yeah.
yeah, and some really notorious Columbia drug lord or something.
Yeah.
Paul Aption was a very nice guy. I mean, while we were all sitting waiting for them to get you, and he was waiting, I guess, for his like whatever. We got to have conversations with a lot of these people, and it was interesting. It
Yeah,
was
it
very
is.
interesting. But I could tell you just from being up there when Vinny was out while we were waiting for them to bring you, he was fishing. He wanted to know,
Yeah.
did you flip? It was obvious, and
You
we
can't
just kept
blame him.
no, and we kept the
Yeah.
conversation very light and cordial, but we did not obviously want to share any of that information to
Right.
confirm it. It was confirmed at your trial. That was the
That's enough.
defense. They did. Yeah, they
Well,
didn't expect the FBI never expected you to do that. They thought they had you on the ropes and that you would try to keep your identity hidden and go to court and sit up there and they didn't even think you were going to testify.
well,
Boy, did you.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but didn't the prison violate their own rules with me being in the box too? That's how I was able
Yeah,
to get out?
yeah, we don't know what happened to the paper, but there was an order issued by the FBI to the Bureau of Prisons to keep you in the box
See that?
because you would not give up Tony Polero. They
Yes.
just wanted, and they wanted somebody, they wanted a conviction so bad on that, and they didn't get it. They didn't get it
No.
from you. They didn't get it from him. They went back after him even after the fact. Remember, for lying to
Yeah.
them. And I
Yeah,
remember that
exactly.
I remember he set up that meeting with your then fiance to
Yep.
beg her to talk to you, to tell you to lie. And I remember telling her, like, he doesn't need to lie.
Mhm.
His truth is what's going to get them out. And I
Well,
know that
good, I'm
um,
sorry.
I'm sorry, Ed was trying to throw you under the bus. I mean, he
Yep.
was testifying against, he was arguing against you in court. It was horrible. How
That's
do
why
you
I
do
didn't
that?
like Ed McDonald. Yeah, he was
Yeah,
well, I look, I
he's a
yeah.
dirtbag.
He was sticking up for his client, and but Jose said, "Don't even worry about that." I remember that. He says he can't, because listen, his client Tony didn't even get the thing to go up on the stand. But if you remember correctly, what did they tell me? Just testify against Tony. You'll walk right out right now.
Yeah,
And I
but
was
you
in the
wouldn't do it.
box.
Yeah, you were sick. I remember you were so sick.
Yes, yes.
The judge should do whatever for them to take you to the hospital. I remember they took you there, walked you into the ER, walked you back out, and brought you
Yep.
back to the prison.
Just
But
just
they
a
never
certain, yeah.
even just to say that they took you to the hospital
Yep.
because I remember Jose and I were firing off letters to the judge constantly about that because it was a violation of her orders. And she
Yes.
just kind of, she didn't even know that you were sick. So that was a big thing too. So when you had Roy as an attorney, that was when you were sick. And I remember your fiance reached out to me and said, I didn't even know he was sick. He never mentioned it to me, but they had
Yeah.
already cut you open. That was the first time they took you into some kind of a utility closet on the
Mhm.
on the show and cut
Yeah.
you open without anesthesia. They gave you some kind of a stick to bite down on
Yeah, one
and
of those
cut
pop
you,
sticks. Mhm.
yeah, and cut you open to take out, the masses that were forming from the staph infection.
Mhm.
And
Well,
you were
I went
standing
from
in court and you had stitches. You were standing in
yes,
court with stitches in your groin where they
that's
took
right.
that first mass out. And your fiance didn't find out until after. And she was furious and on the phone with us constantly. Like, we need to get the judge aware of this. And the next week or two, they called a wellness hearing. They wanted to know what condition you were in. And you still wouldn't admit to it in court. You were like, I'm fine,
Yeah.
because you were afraid of the repercussions going back to the prison. I remember that.
Well,
You were
you see
afraid
what
of
they
what they
did.
would do to you.
You see what they did with they when they killed Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, well,
Okay, they
we
got away
all
with that,
know,
didn't they?
anybody
So
who's ever been in MCC knows that that is not physically possible.
that's right.
What, that he did not get you. If you've ever been into that prison, you know that it's not physical or any of the BOP prisons.
Nope.
There is
And
no way that he killed himself. It's
and
not, it's not.
I was 220 something pounds when I went into prison. I came home when I was when we won the trial, I was 173 pounds. Okay, and I was so think of me. I'm almost 6 foot tall. Think how I look like. I looked emaciated.
Yeah.
Forget
Yep,
about
I
it.
remember. I remember, and as you went through the trial, your clothes were fitting more loosely. Even the
They were
even the
hanging
day
off.
of your yeah, even the day of your acquittal, we were, we were standing there. I remember that, your clothes were very baggy and you were
Mhm.
unshaven because you couldn't really shave well. Um, but
Horrible.
oh my gosh, what a mess that was. And honestly, just the all of it goes back to, like, Dean kind of felt somewhat responsible because he told you to cooperate when you were back with him on your
Yeah.
first bit.
In order to,
But
yeah.
yeah, but ultimately, um, the
Well,
truth
that's actually
prevailed. The truth prevailed, and
it did.
justice was done. And I remember you saying, because I don't know if it was with one of the reporters or if it was, I can't remember who you said it to, but somebody said to you, you won the case, and I remember you saying, I won the case, but I lost my whole life.
Yeah, that's right, I did. I couldn't do the things I used to do, couldn't go to places I wanted to go to, and they didn't care. Like I said, they offer you the witness protection program. Get the heck out of here. You know something? These people, I'm just happy that you came on today, and just the fact that, like I said, I want everybody to realize it. And it's not like I'm against the government, like I hate it and everything like that. And don't get me wrong, they do some good things here and there, but for the most part, to go after a guy like me who actually was working with them. I'm like, I'm not a disgruntled worker that I did something wrong and I got caught and I'm mad. No, that's not the case here. The case is the fact that I was with them. I gave them good information. I didn't make any money from these people. All they ever did was give me my money back. They never anything I put out. I didn't get no money, and I was allowed $100,000 a year. If I knew that, I would have told them give me the 100,000 a year. But I
Michael
didn't.
Cooks, Michael
I didn't
Cooks
know.
made a fortune with them.
Yeah,
He was
Cooks
getting
made
two
a
grand a
fortune.
month. He had two
Yeah,
grand a month, and they had him in Witsec for 18 months or something like that.
yeah, yep. They had him under protect. Plus, he was still collecting his welfare, his food stamps, and every other thing else he was
Yeah,
getting. Yeah,
yep,
forget about it. Because he
whatever other schemes he was running.
Ah, listen, there was the way they pay certain people. Look, maybe I blame myself. Maybe I'm stupid. I should have asked for money. I didn't know. I just didn't focus on it because it wasn't like a career move I was trying to make. I just wanted to know what happened with my father. So, but
Yeah, that
you
was your
know,
whole goal. Your whole goal was not to
and that's
serve
it.
Joe Barone. It was to serve a purpose and, you know, get some again closure. The closure that you gave to other families, you still
That's
don't
right.
have. You
That's
still
right.
don't have that.
Do you want to add anything else before anything? I mean, I'm just want to, before we go, because I just wanted to make sure that, you got anything else out or whatever. There might be things I forgot about the case too, but we could maybe have you back on again if that's okay. If you do remember anything else, that's fine.
Yeah, if there's anything else you want to discuss around this, I can
Okay.
definitely make some time on my schedule. Just let me
Oh,
know in advance and we'll work it out.
I'm glad you're doing well. Hope your family and everybody's doing well too. I can't thank you enough for coming on because this was I've been talking about the betrayal with the FBI since I started this show, and the fact of the matter is, at least I got somebody from the legal team now, finally, to track you down and everything like that. So that's good. Uh, I sorry they couldn't know who you are, but I totally get it and I understand. But I can't thank you enough for coming on and showing. Hopefully, I'll get some comments from the show. I'll write them down, and then I'll definitely send something in case there's anything else. If you're willing to come back on, I appreciate that.
Now, thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here with you and being able to kind of recount some of these things. There were some funny things that happened and some really messed up things that happened. So,
That's a fact. Well, with that, we'll end it. Thanks for coming on. We'll see you again. Hopefully, like I said, I wish you all the best. And if anything comes up, please reach out.
okay, thank you, Joe, and best to you and yours.
Thank you.